West Asia is staring at another war. Israel versus Palestine, Israel versus Hamas, and Israel versus Lebanon. It's a complicated mix. Rockets and threats are raining on Israel, and they're paying back in kind. And the way things are going, it could blow up into a full-fledged war. We say this because it has happened before, and it started exactly like this. The tension began at the Al-Aqsa Mosque. We've been telling you about the clashes there, the Al-Aqsa Mosque. This mosque is the third holiest site in Islam after Mecca and Medina. It is said that the Prophet Muhammad ascended to heaven from here. Now, the same mosque is a site of conflict. Israeli forces raided the mosque to remove worshippers who were apparently carrying weapons. The Palestinians fought back. Soon the fighting spread beyond the mosque compound. Militant group Hamas entered the fray. They started firing rockets at Israel, first from Gaza, then from Lebanon. Yesterday, there was a barrage of rockets that came from Lebanon. Israel responded with warplanes and conducted airstrikes on Lebanon. And both sides are now issuing threats. Hamas says, and I'm quoting, they won't sit with their arms crossed in the face of Israeli aggression. Israel says Hamas will pay a price for this. The world is calling for calm, but to no avail. Let's get you the latest. Last night, northern Israel was targeted. At least 34 rockets were fired from Lebanon. Israel said it intercepted most of them, but the ones that got through did cause damage. Some buildings were hit, 2 people were injured. They were hit by shrapnel. For Israel, the rocket attacks are a clear provocation. This is the biggest strike from Lebanon, from Lebanese soil, since 2006. That's the year when Israel and Lebanon went to war. And this time, the attacks are coming from Hamas in Lebanon. At least that's what Israel says. Hamas is a militant group morphed into a political party. It controls the Gaza Strip. Israel calls the Hamas a terrorist organization. It says they are the ones who fired the rockets from Lebanon. Israeli defense forces were quick to counterattack. They dispatched jets. They struck targets inside Lebanon and also across the Gaza Strip.
Around 3:30 a.m., there were aviation airstrikes, and we felt it. Then they struck here, but we weren't sure of it in the village. People went onto the streets, but didn't know. When we saw the soil, I knew it was here in our farmland, so we came and viewed it. People came to check the crater caused. We depend on God. May God ease it on everyone.
Israeli fighters used around 20 missiles. They hit at least 4 sites in a span of 10 minutes. And this may not be the end of Israeli action. Prime Minister Netanyahu has promised a strong response.
Recently, I have made it clear that our enemies should not misjudge us. The internal debate in Israel will not prevent us from taking action against them wherever and whenever necessary. Regarding the aggression against us on the other fronts, we will strike our enemies and they will pay the price for any act of aggression.
Israel is sending a clear message. It holds Lebanon responsible for the missile attacks and it wants to stop all Hamas operations in Lebanon. But it's not going to be easy. And Hamas too wants to punish Israel for the clashes at Al-Aqsa, among other things. Before the rocket attacks, the Hamas sent out this warning.
What happened in Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Israel forces' assaults on the worshippers, is a crime and is a violation of all human rights and laws. And the occupation should be held responsible for it and its repercussions, because our people will not let this pass without a response to the terrorizing of the worshippers who were safe in the house of God. The strike on Gaza this morning is an attempt to prevent Gaza from uniting with our people in Jerusalem. We will remain to function as a shield to our people in Jerusalem and the blessed Al-Aqsa Mosque.
Neither side is prepared to back down at this point, and this raises the risk of conflict. Not the first time this is happening. In 2021, there were similar clashes. They led to a war. Israel and Hamas fought an 11-day war, and the parallels this time are uncanny. In 2021, Israel evicted families in East Jerusalem. Then the Israeli police raided worshippers at Al-Aqsa. That triggered attacks from Hamas. They began firing rockets. Israel fired back with missiles. And 2 years on, the same thing is happening. There is a UN peacekeeping force in Lebanon. It has issued a statement. It says the situation is, quote-unquote, extremely serious. The United Nations has urged restraint. So has the United States. The US, remember, is Israel's top ally. It says Israel has the right to defend itself, but both sides should work towards dialing down tensions.
We are concerned by the scenes out of Jerusalem, and it is our viewpoint that it is absolutely vital that the sanctity of holy sites be preserved. We condemn the launch of rockets from Lebanon and Gaza at Israel. Our commitment to Israel's security is ironclad, and we recognize Israel's legitimate right to defend itself against all forms of aggression.
America says the sanctity of the holy site should be preserved, and that's a complicated issue. This is a site where Jewish temples once stood. They were demolished centuries ago. Now there are mosques and a peace deal that hardly holds. Jews can visit the site, but they cannot pray here. Muslims can pray, but they were flushed out of the mosque by Israeli forces. It was a security operation. The worshippers had explosive fireworks in the mosque. It is happening during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan, also the Jewish festival of Passover. As the tension and fighting spreads, the facts are getting blurred. Israel blames the Hamas for the rocket strikes, but reports say that the Hezbollah may also be involved. They may have backed the Hamas strikes. And who are the Hezbollah? This is an Iran-backed Shia group based in Lebanon. Also, they call themselves a political party. The Hezbollah is an arch-rival of Israel, and they back the Assad regime in Syria. Israel has been fighting a shadow war with Iran there. It has been targeting the Hezbollah. In fact, Israel has intensified operations in the last few months. Since the beginning of this year, Israel has conducted at least 10 airstrikes inside Syria. Israeli airplanes struck drone factories. They killed at least 2 members of the Hezbollah. So they may be hitting back with the help of the Hamas. And if Israel decides to retaliate further, the situation could spin out of control. Let's return to what's happening on the planet and have a look at what's going on in Myanmar, a country that has been under military rule for 2 years now. The people of Myanmar are fleeing, they're escaping the clutches of the military junta and seeking refuge in neighboring Thailand. Reports say there are frequent clashes in Myanmar, violence has escalated, the military is fighting armed rebels, and the ordinary people, as always, are bearing the brunt. Here's more. This is what the border between Myanmar and Thailand looks like. These are people who fled their homes. They come from Myanmar, and Myanmar is at war. A civil war that is seeing several rebel groups fighting the military regime. Ordinary people, like always, are at the receiving end of this fight. Thousands have fled eastern Myanmar and have taken refuge in Thailand. This comes amid intense fighting between the army and resistant groups in the east. On Wednesday, at least 5,400 civilians crossed over to Thailand from Myanmar's Mayawadi district, and more are waiting to cross over. The Thai government is providing shelter, food and water to the refugees. The military junta is not exactly having a walk in the park either. It deposed the democratically elected government of Aung San Suu Kyi in February 2021. And since then, it has been fighting armed rebel groups and anti-coup organizations. They formed an alliance of sorts against the military rulers. The rebel groups had been fighting the government for years, but when the military took over, these groups joined hand with pro-democracy organizations. This has compounded the challenges for Myanmar's military regime. It has resorted to using lethal force against opponents. The human cost of the military rule has been enormous. More than 1.5 million people have been displaced, 40,000 homes have been gutted, 8 million children no longer have access to education, and about 15 million people are said to be facing a severe shortage of food. The military has jailed over 17,000 dissidents, and over 3,000 people have been killed in the past 2 years alone. Last week, 8 people, including children, were killed in northwest Myanmar. And on March 15th, 22 people were killed in an attack on a monastery in southern Myanmar. Among those killed were 3 monks. And these are just two examples. Such acts of violence have become the norm in Myanmar. The generals blame the rebels for this. In fact, they say that attacks by armed rebels have taken 5,500 civilian lives. Myanmar has a humanitarian disaster on its hands. The United Nations says 17.6 million people, who make up a third of the country's population, need humanitarian aid. The health system is in tatters. There's a mental health crisis that has taken hold of the country. Suicides are rising. So are deaths due to diseases. The World Bank describes Myanmar's economy as severely diminished. So it's not really a tough call for the people. Their best bet to survive is to get out of Myanmar and hope that normalcy returns soon. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. We're starting with the US. 3 Democrats got a hero's welcome at noisy gun control protests in the Tennessee Capitol. This was ahead of a vote from Republicans to expel them for joining a gun protest last week in the wake of the Nashville shootings. In France, protests over the pension reform are still going strong. Hundreds of thousands of people stormed the streets against the pension reform. They also targeted President Macron's favorite bistro in Paris. In Sudan, hundreds of pro-democracy activists took to the streets. The military is supposed to hand over power to a civilian government. It's been delayed, hence the protest. And finally, what happened today in history? In the year 1994, a civil war erupted in Rwanda. In the months that followed, the Rwanda genocide took place. It saw 100 days of slaughter. Over 800,000 people were killed. They belonged to a minority group. It was one of the darkest episodes in modern-day Africa. We would have liked to end with better visuals, but this is our world. We're leaving you with this. Thanks for watching. See you next week.